over to you, Parag.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, good. So I'll start by telling you guys slightly more about us so you have the context. We're at an early stage. Think about us as a Series A, pre-Series A technology-focused fund. These are the areas we invest in: consumer internet, mobile, software, IoT, machine learning, and fintech. Broad technology, that is. Sorry, give me a second. I don't know what happened there.
It's okay.
Okay, the investment size is 5 to 15 crores. That's to start with in these kind of rounds. So companies which typically have, say, 2 to 15 lakhs of revenues a month are 15 to 30 months old. These are the kind of companies that we are investing in, those kind of amounts. So round size is anywhere between 10 to 30 crores. There are 4 of us. All of us based in Bangalore. We have just recruited a 5th person. She'll be joining us mid-May. It's about a 2008 vintage fund. So we have been around for about 12 years now. And this is our 3rd fund that we are managing. You can find us at inventusindia.com. And I will just briefly take you through a portfolio. We build our portfolio on a grounds-up basis. We do not do tops-down analysis that we are going to invest in mobility this year or electric vehicles or for that matter, home services or whatever. If we like the founders and the space they're playing in, we tend to invest as long as it is a technology or a technology-enabled company. So that's the way we have gone about building these companies. I have a reasonably decent track record, Redbus, Policy Bazaar, and various others, B2B companies as well. B2B companies are about 40 to 45% of our portfolio, one of whom is also on this call, Move in Sync, that is. So while this is focused on mobility, I thought as a venture capitalist, I should focus at maybe the 20,000-30,000 feet level and cover what is the impact on the ecosystem rather than on mobility in particular. I think much of what I say hopefully will be applicable to any kinds of startup, mobility included. So what really happened here? If I roll back to last year, let us say till about Q3 last year, people were talking about blitzscaling, the concept or the construct made famous by Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn fame. The idea being to grow companies rapidly, being the first mover in large markets, take advantage of network effects, et cetera, without caring too much about efficiency. You knew you were inefficient, but you were growing fast. As a company I used to work for, one of the key guys used to say there, growth hides a lot of sins. So that was the blitzscaling model. You knew it was risky, you grew fast, but you wanted to scale past your competitors at almost without almost caring for cost. Come September 2019, and WeWork is kind of the poster boy there. Mid-August, they filed for their IPO, hoping to raise money at $47 billion. Then they couldn't raise it even at $10 billion. And then the Ubers and the Lyfts and the Slacks, etc., started falling. So to that extent, I think it was September 19 was some kind of a sense check that started happening. So the overall ecosystem started declining. Maybe the slope was 10%, but people started getting more cautious, starting September 2019. But March changed it all. And to Sequoia's credit, I think that letter theirs to their portfolio companies in early March 6th, I think the letter was, that COVID is going to be a really, really tough one. And that's exactly what happened. And the focus now is essentially on staying alive, which is, as it happens, a Bee Gees song. But the thing has turned completely. 180 degrees. So if in the blitzscaling world, the focus was on founders who could tell a story very, very well, today it is all about execution. It is not about whether you are a first-time founder or a second-time founder, or what colleges you went to anymore. But I think now, from now on, starting maybe in March, you'll be judged on your numbers, just your numbers, so to speak. So the cycle of venture funding, the cycle of angel funding has turned 180 degrees. Needless to say, you already know that. I think the other thing I would like to say here is we have seen, many of us who have been around, we have seen economic crisis. We have seen 2000, for example, 2008, et cetera, things like that, worsened by 9/11, for example, the 2000 crisis. All of us have been through that. But this one is not only an economic crisis. This is not because the real estate sector went overboard in 2008, or for that matter, the consumer internet sector went overboard in 2000. This affects society. This affects health of people. We are concerned about our own health, our family's health, our parents' health, and that is a discontinuity, I should say. This is a kind of a 100-year event. As we know, Spanish flu is almost 100 years back. Very little institutional memory from that. My 90-year-old father can't remember a day, and he's been through partition. He comes from the other side of the border, so he's seen the worst, but he still can't remember anything this different, so to speak. And when I relate that to, let us say, the founder mentality is typically a growth mentality, isn't it? He doesn't want to go into his tortoise shell, he or she doesn't want to go into his tortoise shell and just survive when things are bad. So it requires a different kind of thinking, a different kind of founder to do better now. So essentially, what I'm saying is that the vanity metrics days are over. Cash is king. I'm fond of that particular saying. It goes, revenue is vanity, profits is sanity, and cash flow is reality. I think that is the world that we are currently living in. Moving to some of the tactics that one needs to employ, or what I'm seeing our portfolio companies employ. So everybody is focusing one single focus, that cash out date. That should not be less than 12 months for sure. Whatever cash you have, you survive for at least 12 months, ideally 18. Else you are if you go out raising money during these 12 months, the probability is going to be low. And hence people are focused. The number one priority is that. The other thought is that revenue is unpredictable. Some of the companies in our portfolio, the revenues have dropped to zero simply because of the lockdown currently. Hopefully that won't continue for too long, but that's not a factor that is controllable at these times. So what do you do? Cost is the only controllable. You focus on that. Communication to your employees, starting with your employees, ensuring the safety of them in a work from home scenario. How do you keep in touch? How do you motivate, etc., etc. So people are talking about, I heard an entrepreneur talk about he's doing 4 town halls on a weekly basis, for example. His is a very spread out company, but that's what people are doing. Communicating is not a problem at this time. Please do it. Focus on existing customers versus new customers. So the customer success function in, let us say, a SaaS company is probably becoming one of the most important functions, because not many new customers are going to sign up at this time, isn't it? So the existing customer focus, reducing churn in those is going to be a key focus for people. Experiments, especially the non-revenue kind, people are cutting. They are improving their processes. DSO, for example, if accounts receivable had gone up, and because of lack of focus, they are focusing on it. Cloud expenses, marketing expenses, variabilizing your expenses, all the cost items people are focusing on. A company of ours, for example, used to cut out monthly contracts, kind of fixed monthly contracts with truck operators within the city. Now they are doing it on a daily basis. So you are variabilizing as much as possible so that your costs and revenues are totally related. They're looking at additional sources of revenue. I think there's a model which was developed in the U.S. Air Force some time back. It's called the Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act model, which is an iterative model. So it enables you to, as the situation changes, like it is in the COVID scenario on a weekly basis, you're kind of iterating this model on a weekly basis to react, so to speak, to act, and that is generally being talked about as a good model to follow. There is enough and more information now on the web. One of the advantages of social media, and social media has many disadvantages during this time, but one of the key advantages is there is so much of information available today. For example, 8 VC firms have got together, Indian VC firms, and put out a list of tactics being employed, and you can access that on Notion and get some ideas for yourself. Coming to how we are thinking, investors in general, VCs in particular, but I think most of what I say would be applicable to earlier stage investors as well. So most of us are becoming slightly internally focused. As you can imagine, first you look at the flock internally, just like all of you as entrepreneurs are focusing internally on your companies first. I think it is happening to us as well. So that is taking up more of our time. We will triage. Triage is a word that comes from the medical arena. Triage is a difficult word to give you a meaning of what that means. If you take the example of what Italy did, greater than 80-year-olds don't get a ventilator. That's what will happen. Some of these companies we'll have to just let go because there is maybe they are so far away from the path to profitability, or they're so small, or we don't see a future, etc., etc. Or even if we do, our co-investors do not agree. So all of those situations will lead to a few mortality situations for sure. So as an entrepreneur, what should you do? Talk to your existing VC, talk to your existing angel investor, etc., etc. Go there with a point of view of your own. This is what I'm going to do to cut costs. This is why I'm not affected if you're not affected, or I'm marginally affected, or I'm badly affected, whatever be that case. Form a point of view, form a plan, so to speak, of how you're going to tackle it, and go and talk to your investors, but lead that conversation. Don't let them lead it, because you know the most about your business, and make proactive cuts. Do not let your investors drive this, would be my advice. Ask them for a bridge, whether they would be willing to give a bridge or not to help you reach the next milestone. So cover that ground, because cash at this point in time is the principal commodity, isn't it? So focus on that. There will be broken deals. We have had 2 M&As, one of the companies being sold, another one was selling a unit within the company within the short time frame. Both those deals have fallen through. This will happen more and more as we go along, as this deepens, which it will, unfortunately. You will see tougher terms, higher liquidation preferences. People will ask for valuation breaks. If you've got a term sheet, they will ask for valuation breaks. I heard of a deal which a friend was running, an investment banker friend was running, where the incoming fund asked for a valuation break, because the situation has changed, and the entrepreneur said nothing doing, and 5 days later is probably regretting it. So some of these things will happen. You will have to take these tough decisions, but know that at this point in time you need to survive. So you might have to take some tough turns as you go along. There will be down rounds for sure. The last round was in different times, was in September 2019 or earlier, different times from today. So you might face down rounds. There's a very high probability to that. And most of us will focus on a path to profitability for the companies that we invest in and will be investing in this time. So I wanted to now, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Parag, actually, go ahead. Sorry.
I wanted to shift the focus now to the future. What happens? What behavioral changes result as a consequence? So work from home, clearly, most of us are doing that. Two of my founders, I sit on 7 boards, 2 of those guys are actually planning to have 20 to 25% of their capacity on an ongoing basis, even after this crisis comes to an end, for people to be working from home. That obviously has implications on solutions like Zoom, has implications on Deepesh's company, for example, and other mobility providers, isn't it? Because if 20, 25% of the capacity of people, less they are traveling, they are not traveling on a daily basis, then it leads to a shrinkage in demand. So some of these behavioral changes will impact some of the companies, and companies will have to adjust. Discretionary products that are there versus essentials. We have a grocery supply kind of a company that seems to be holding up, but a discretionary company which is in the, let's say, advertising led, for example, is badly hurt. During the last recession, for example, during 2008, that is, we had an advertising led company whose revenues declined from 100 lakhs to 6 lakhs over a period of 6-7 months because it was advertising led. So that sharper cut could happen in discretionary companies. Digital distribution, on the other hand, it is our belief things like grocery offer matter. Let us say a company like Udan or our own Policy Bazaar, etc. What is happening is that some of these physical distributors who are one-man shows, who now have to manage the warehouse, have to ensure that there are delivery people, have to interact with the OEMs as well, plus manage the cash flow. These old guys who have been running their businesses as Hindustan Lever or ITC's distributor for the last 50 years, or their fathers and then their sons, that distribution is probably going to be significantly impacted. As a consequence, the new age distribution companies, we have a company called Peelworks or in Udan, or in Policy Bazaar's cases, will you allow an agent to come to your home anytime soon? Will you go to a bank to buy a insurance policy anymore if you can do it on the web? So digital distribution could definitely benefit. People will focus on higher margin, kind of higher gross margin is what I mean. Lower gross margin focused companies will kind of be effective. There will be overall broader changes as well. Think about a company with a supply chain in China who was maintaining just-in-time inventory. People will think about each of these supply chains and sources, etc. If you looked at, I go back a long way. If you go back to, let us say, 2001, what happened after 9/11, BCP and disaster recovery planning, which were not in the lexicon at that time, came into the lexicon. Corporates started focusing on BCP, DRP. Some of those changes are likely to happen on the supply chain side. There will be implications on the world order as well. You would have heard many people likening this to a World War III. I don't want to walk down that route, but you can reasonably expect that with so many people dying, there will be changes in the world order. Coming to the bright side of it, I think as Churchill beautifully said, never waste a good crisis, and we did that in our country. Did that in 1991, isn't it? We came close to going bankrupt, and Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh pulled us together. I'm just naming those 2 names. Obviously, there were other people involved. but that's a crisis helps you take some tough decisions, and that is what and there is always a bright side ahead. So one of the things is CAC is beginning to reduce. The money that many of us were paying Google and Facebook, it was going from the VC pocket to to the pockets of Google and Facebook. That is reducing as a consequence. CACs are reducing. China and Korea are coming back. On the 9th of March, we met a company of ours which used to source from China, sole source. They at that time said China was back to 20% production. China apparently is now back to 80% production. So they are coming back. So there is no reason to believe that we won't. We might take longer, shorter, I don't know for sure, but we will come back as well. I was reading a very good paper called Roaring Out of Recession by the Harvard Business School. It is a 2010 paper where they went back and analyzed what kind of companies did a good job of coming out of a recession. They went back 3 recessions. This was written shortly after the 2008 recession in 2010. So they didn't analyze 2008 very deeply, but the previous 3 recessions, and they looked at one data for a year, and they classified companies into 3 types. One was the prevention type, which was kind of which just hunkered down and cut costs here and all over, cutting muscle instead of cutting the fat, and as a consequence lost out when things down. Sony is given as an example. The promotion kind of companies who said nothing has changed. I will in fact, recession blackjack was the example given by Carly Fiorina of HP. She bought Compaq, bad decision. HP suffered as a consequence. So those are the kind of companies that are overly aggressive in these times. I think the ones that came out well, and Target and Staples, are the ones that adopted a judicious mix. They did cut costs, or they did cut products, or they did cut locations which were unprofitable or marginally profitable, and yet focused on expansion into new higher margin categories, etc., etc. So that judicious mix of both the short, medium term, and the long term, the ones that could find it were the ones. So this is a very delicate balance. It will test all your business skills. It will test leadership skills, but that's the kind of company that survives. I think the analogy for me is 65 million years back when an asteroid hit the Earth, all the dinosaurs, 75% of the all species on the planet of any kind, plants included, just disappeared, isn't it? But 25% survived, as well as mammals did very well. The biggest mammal then apparently was about 500 grams, which was rats, etc., etc. And they went on. We are tetrapods. The crocodiles survived, for example. So there will be a few survivors who will do very well in subsequent, who will pass through this nuclear winter, so to speak, and do very well. And there will be a new kind of company that will come, which will do very well out of this crisis. So if you look at the 2000 crisis, for example, Just Dial and Naukri came out of there, isn't it? So there will be companies that will, just like crocodiles, that will come out, and subsequently there will be companies that Flipkart created thereafter, which will do very well. I think at the end of it, I'll say it's a quote you would have heard in this context, often attributed to Darwin, but actually not said by Darwin. It goes that it is not the strongest of the species that survive, not even the most intelligent. It is the one most adaptable to change. So I think these are times when we have to be the adaptability kind. That is what will help us in the longer term. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Hey, Parag, wonderful. We 100% agree. This adaptation is the key. Okay, that's very, very said.